Hi everyone, I'm Nick Olivo, and today I'll be reviewing the Call of Cthulhu scenario, The Lightless Beacon, for Roll20. The scenario was written by Lee Carr and Lynn Hardy, and is available for free on both the Chaosium website and the Roll20 marketplace. This is a great starter scenario for new players and new keepers, and can be used as the introduction to a new Call of Cthulhu campaign. I'll go over what's included in this scenario, where you can get some additional resources, and I'll also offer some tips and insight based on how the scenario went for my players. Before we dive in, I'd just like to thank Roll20 for sponsoring this video. Now, I do want to mention that this review is intended for keepers, so any players out there, spoilers ahead, consider yourselves warned. The Lightless Beacon is a survival horror scenario that takes place on a small island off the coast of Massachusetts called Beacon Island. About 2 months ago, a ship carrying gold from the cult of Dagon wrecked off the coast of the island, and the cultists have been trying to recover the gold ever since. Now, the scenario opens when the boat that the players are on hits some rocks, and they get shipwrecked on Beacon Island. They'll make their way to the island's lighthouse, where they discover some grisly scenes, and ultimately are attacked by Deep One Younglings who are there trying to recover the gold. So that's the basic setup of the scenario. Let's take a look at what you get inside. So you get landing page artwork. There's a map showing where the island is in relation to the coast of Massachusetts, a map of the island itself, as well as a map of the lighthouse. You also receive 4 pre-generated investigators, each with their own backstory and reason for being on the boat that sank. There's the text of the adventure, a few handouts, and the information for the monsters that the players will encounter during the course of the scenario. So let's start out with the maps. The area map that you see here is really only relevant for the first few minutes of the adventure. You can show the players that they're on a boat around Folly Point, and that they're moving towards Rockport. Then the lighthouse that's on Beacon Island goes out, the ship hits some rocks, and at that point the characters are pushed into a lifeboat and sent toward the island. From there on, you're going to be using the Dead Beacon map. The party lands here at North Pier, and from there is free to explore the island. Now, one thing to mention is that while the map gives you this key showing what all the elements are, there are no corresponding numbered entries in the text of the scenario. So you'll want to read through the text of the Dead Beacon journal entry here, and add notes to yourself inside. When the characters land, they can find some duck-like footprints which lead them away from the lighthouse and into the thicket, where they can find the remains of one of the lighthouse keepers. But given the weather conditions and a reluctance to split up, my players went into the lighthouse cottage and stayed there. That means they missed finding the lighthouse keeper's corpse, and more importantly, they didn't get the gun that he has. Also, because they didn't circle around down here, they didn't see that the generator that's powering the cottage is getting rained on and is in danger of shorting out. So keepers, you might want to have your players hear a gunshot from the fight between the lighthouse keeper and the Deep One Younglings, or maybe a lightning flash illuminates some figures off to the east, and the characters then might be more inclined to leave the relative safety of the cottage if they think that someone's in trouble and needs help. Once your players are inside the cottage, you'll be using this map, and several of the rooms have clues that let the characters realize that weird stuff's going on, that the markings on the gold that's turned up are associated with a town called Innsmouth, and anything to do with Innsmouth should be avoided at all costs. The characters will find a bloody mess in the kitchen and can determine that the blood isn't human. And all this gives you a great opportunity to build up some suspense before the Deep One Younglings come for the characters. When the characters are in the study, they'll find some unsettling sketches and a painting showing a view from the study where a sinister figure with glowing eyes is watching the lighthouse from the trees. So if you want to increase the tension even further, have the player characters catch sight of a pair of glowing eyes as they look away from the window. Now ultimately, the characters will ascend the lighthouse, and they'll find a broken radio they can try to fix, and also a pair of dead cultists and another dead lighthouse keeper. At this point, the younglings on the island will attack, and it's a life or death situation. One thing to note here is that while the characters can discover some firearms around the island, only one of the pre-generated characters, the bureau agent, has any significant skill with firearms. So that means that the other characters at best are going to have a 20% chance of landing a shot when they're fighting the Deep One Younglings. So when I ran this, my players had the most amazing luck because pretty much every one of them rolled an extreme success during combat. So you never know. But really, you should be prepared for some very brutal and likely fatal combat in this scenario. Now, as mentioned before, you get 4 pre-generated characters: the bureau agent, the antiques dealer, the marine biologist, and the artist. Each character comes with a short, helpful backstory that lets players get a feel for them, and each one brings something unique to the table. The scenario also provides advice for what to do if you have fewer than 4 players, and I actually did that because I only had 3 in my group, so I took the module's suggestion of using the bureau agent, the antiques dealer, and the marine biologist, and that worked out really well. The scenario also provides advice on what you should do if the characters go insane, and even though my characters didn't wind up going insane, I thought this was a really helpful addition to the module overall. It's also worth mentioning that none of the characters come with artwork or tokens by default, so you'll need to provide your own. Now, as far as the handouts go, these 3 handouts correspond to documents that characters can find during the course of the adventure. And one thing I really appreciate about this is there is just plain text for each handout provided. Maybe my eyes are just getting old, but I find that I really struggle with reading handwritten style fonts. They look beautiful, but it's really hard to read them sometimes. The art handouts that you see here correspond to illustrations that you'd find in the PDF version, and these aren't called out anywhere in the adventure specifically. So you can show the Lightless Beacon art handout as the characters are approaching the island, show the cottage art handout when they're investigating the study, and the mysterious corpses art handout when they find the corpses up in the lighthouse. One item that isn't provided is the screwed up letter from Cassidy that's listed on the antique dealer's character sheet. This letter is why the antiques dealer is in the scenario, and so I made something up and gave that to the player running the antiques dealer. I've provided the text of that letter down in the description. Feel free to take that and modify it as you see fit. Now, I do want to mention a couple of things about the Youngling character sheet. This is the primary monster that you'll be using throughout the course of the scenario. And you'll notice that when you make a fighting roll with the Youngling, it gives you damage listed as 1d3 plus 1d4. So it's not actually rolling the damage. To fix that, click on Edit Mode, and then put the damage inside a pair of double brackets, like what I'm doing right now. And then save, and when you roll again, you'll see now we actually get the damage rolled. So you'll want to make sure you do that. Also, if you click on the projectile needle attack, you're going to get a syntax error. To fix that, what you'll want to do is go into edit mode again, change the damage here from C description to 0, and then paste the description into the description box. The description is actually found in this Youngling handout, which has the artwork. You can just scroll down here until you find the projectile needle. You can copy this whole thing and then just paste it into the description like so. Turn off edit mode and now run again. And you see we get our attack, and then there's the description. So just a couple of things to know here. It's a few minor tweaks, only takes a couple of seconds to fix it, but it's something you want to know about before you actually try to make these attacks. The module says that you can run this scenario in an hour, but honestly, I find that a little aggressive, especially if you are a new keeper or if your players are new to Call of Cthulhu. My group has run Cthulhu scenarios before, and it took us about 2 hours to get through this scenario, and that gave for plenty of time to do investigation and some good role-playing and, of course, all the combat. So I'd say bank on an hour and a half to 2 hours to run this one. Now, if you like to run your games Theater of the Mind style, then the materials included in this module are more than sufficient. But if your players are more used to D&D or Pathfinder, then the maps here may feel a tad underwhelming. There's nothing wrong with this map, but it really feels like a bright, sunny day, when in fact this scenario takes place in the dark, in the middle of a massive storm. So I used this map here, and this really, I thought, suit the mood better. You've got the surf crashing against the shore very violently, it looks like it's raining, the tone of the map is much darker, and it provides a lot more detail around the things that you'll find in the area. This map is a pay-what-you-want, available from Lovemaps out on DriveThruRPG. I'll include a link to it down in the description. The suggested price is 50 cents. I mean, really, you can't go wrong with that. All in all, this is a fun scenario and a great way to introduce new players to Call of Cthulhu. I'll put a link down to the scenario in the description below. I hope you and your players have fun with it. And in the meantime, I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, please give it a like and consider subscribing. And until next time, folks, have a great day.